The cold open begins in Senate Hearing Room 226, 9:07 a.m. The ceiling lights are sterile, humming faintly like a machine too old to replace. Beneath them, rows of suits and staffers murmur and shuffle, the air thick with anticipation. Not for justice, but for spectacle. Senator Ted Cruz, his posture relaxed, his smirk sharpened, leans into the microphone and says, "Let's not pretend every police interaction is about race. Not every incident is George Floyd." The words slice through the room like glass on stone, polished, dismissive, rehearsed. It's the kind of line that plays well on cable reruns, the kind that reduces horror into a debate point. Cameras click, pens hover, a few eyebrows twitch, but no one speaks. At the far end of the dais, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett lifts her eyes. She's seated still, almost statuesque, in a slate blue suit with a single gold pin at her collarbone. She doesn't blink, doesn't look at Cruz. Her hand moves slowly toward a tablet screen. There's a pause, the kind of silence that feels like a fuse being lit. Then the screen behind her flickers to life. A video begins, and the room forgets to breathe. What happened in the next 30 minutes didn't just resolve a tense public moment. It exposed something deeper about power, dignity, and truth in America. If this kind of story keeps you listening, like the video, comment your state and local time, subscribe for more voices that won't be silenced. The footage is grainy, timestamp 2020. It's George Floyd, handcuffed, pressed to asphalt, Derek Chauvin's knee dug into his neck. The audio isn't muted. Every breathless "I can't breathe," every plea for his mother, echoes in the Senate hearing like a prayer gone unanswered. Some senators avert their eyes. Others shift uncomfortably in their seats. A staffer in the second row blinks rapidly, lips pressed thin. Cruz stares forward, unmoved, but the corner of his jaw tightens for half a second. Then, silence. No commentary, no overdub. Just the sound of one man dying and a nation watching. Jasmine doesn't rise immediately. She lets the room feel the footage. Not watch it, feel it. When the video ends, she stands slowly. Her heels click once on the tile floor. She turns not to Cruz, but to the room, to the record. "They didn't have to say the N-word," she says, her voice even and low, each word balanced like a blade. The knee said enough. No one speaks, not the chairman, not the aides, not the whispering reporters behind their glowing laptops. Cruz exhales, barely audible. He shifts in his seat, perhaps preparing to retort, but Jasmine is already sitting again. She doesn't look at him, doesn't need to, because it wasn't about him. It was about what America still refuses to say out loud. And in that moment, everyone in the chamber knows it. The clip is already being clipped, screenshots flooding Twitter, audio bits playing on MSNBC by lunchtime. But inside the room, time slows. The silence isn't procedural, it's emotional. Someone coughs in the gallery. The chairman clears his throat and fumbles for the next agenda item like a man who just remembered the building has walls. But the room hasn't moved on. Neither has the country. Outside, protesters gather again on the Capitol steps, some holding cardboard cutouts of knees and necks. One sign reads, "Still can't breathe, still can't vote, still here." In the press bullpen, a reporter mutters into her recorder, "Something shifted today. You could feel it." Jasmine stays quiet. She doesn't bask, doesn't engage. She simply gathers her notes, tucks the tablet under her arm, and walks out as if her job is done. But it isn't, because while the video went viral and Cruz trended for reasons no strategist wanted, the police reform bill, dead for months, suddenly has breath again. Draft copies begin circulating. Old language is redlined. New provisions added, more oversight, clearer body cam mandates, independent reviews. Aides whisper that it might actually make it back to the floor. Not because of politics, because of a 9-minute video, because of one sentence, because a black woman in a room of men decided not to raise her voice, but to raise the evidence instead. The evening news anchors call it a defining moment. The hashtags follow. The backlash follows too. But what lingers longer than headlines is the memory of that stillness. and the quiet authority it carried. The stillness before the storm. Outside the Senate chamber, the marble halls buzz like a disturbed hive. Phones vibrate nonstop in coat pockets. Reporters scurry, eyes on their screens. The clip of Jasmine Crockett's line, "The knee said enough," is everywhere. CNN plays it on loop. Fox runs it with a chyron, representing Crockett politicizes tragedy. But inside the building, another kind of movement begins, one you can't see on camera. Down the corridor, in a wood-paneled room thick with the scent of old leather and fresher anxiety, Senator Cruz stares into a coffee cup like it might offer him better lines than his staff could. Across from him, a communications director hisses into a phone, voice clipped, "No, we're not responding yet. The optics are bad. It's not just a soundbite, it's visual, you understand?" They do. Everyone does. Crockett hadn't debated him. She had dismantled the air around his argument without once using his name. Back inside the hearing room, Jasmine sits quietly, back straight, eyes unreadable. 2 seats down, an older white senator with thinning hair leans in and mutters just loud enough to be heard, "You made your point. Wasn't necessary to grandstand." She doesn't flinch. Instead, she turns the page in her briefing binder. Quietly, deliberately, a full second passes. Then she speaks. Not loudly, but clearly. "I didn't grandstand. I grieved." The senator blinks, caught off guard, not by volume, but by grief named plainly in a room that usually hides behind decorum. That stillness she held after the video, it hasn't left her. It's not the silence of hesitation. It's the silence of someone who has learned when to speak and when to let the weight of truth do the work. Even now, as the hearing moves on to unrelated agenda items, body cam procurement procedures, federal grant compliance, no one is really listening. Every eye keeps drifting back to Jasmine. She doesn't chase attention, but attention clings to her like gravity. Meanwhile, in a group chat titled Poll Com Cruz Rapid, things are unraveling. "We need to pivot, get him in front of a faith-based podcast or local Houston outlet." "Nope, Jasmine's clip is outperforming our rebuttal 11-1. "Do we have a rebuttal?" "No, they don't. Not yet. Because you can't rebut a video everyone has already watched. You can't talk over a man pleading for breath on federal record. And you especially can't win against silence that lets pain echo." Back in her office, Jasmine takes off her blazer, hangs it with care. Her assistant, a young intern named Deshawn, hovers near the door with 2 iced coffees, one half melted from nerves. "That was different," he says, voice low. She gives a soft nod. "Not the plan," she says, "but the moment changed." He places the coffee down and hesitates. "Did you plan to show that clip?" She looks up. "No, but I carried it in my tablet, just in case America needed reminding." By nightfall, the hearing transcript is uploaded, but the moment itself has already left the chamber, traveling faster than any bill ever does. Activists pick it up. Editors remix it. One TikTok overlays her quote with John Legend's "Glory" and racks up 500,000 views before midnight. But for Jasmine, the viral noise is background hum. She reviews the original draft of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act from 2 years ago. Red lines, sticky notes, statistics typed in 11-point font. It's all still there. Untouched, buried in committee. Except now, there's movement. A moderate Democrat from West Virginia emails her staff asking for a conversation. A Republican from Ohio says quietly in the hallway, "You should run that quote in an op-ed." The needle has moved, not far, not fast, but visibly. Late that night, as she steps out of the Capitol into the city's humid dark, a journalist calls out from across the street, "Congresswoman Crockett, do you think Senator Cruz will apologize?" She doesn't stop walking, doesn't break stride, but without turning, she says, "I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm waiting for a vote." Then she disappears into the shadows between marble and streetlight, carrying stillness like a sword. A nation on one knee. The hearing room is empty now, just vacuum lines on the carpet and the faint scent of old cologne lingering in the air. But in living rooms across the country, the moment is still playing. A viral account slows the footage to black and white. George Floyd's face fades into the shadows as Jasmine Crockett's voice overlays. Crystalline. "They didn't have to say the N-word. The knee said enough." The video is stripped of music. No edits, no dramatics, just raw truth in grayscale. And in the stillness of that moment, America listens. In Minneapolis, a mother replays it on her phone while braiding her son's hair before school. In Atlanta, a retired police officer sits in his garage, alone, holding a beer he hasn't sipped for 20 minutes. In Houston, two college students who hadn't spoken in months exchanged just 4 words in their group chat. She really said it. This wasn't just another hearing. It was a reckoning. In barbershops and church basements, the conversation shifts. The question isn't just whether reform is possible, it's whether it will be ignored again. The morning headlines reflect the unrest. USA Today. Crockett confronts Cruz with Floyd clip. Silence follows the Hill. Policing reform revived after House hearing. Stuns nation. Fox News. Opinion. Weaponizing grief. Is this justice or politics? But for those who watched, not passively, but personally, the debate is over. Back at the Capitol, Jasmine's office is under siege. Emails flood in, most of them breathless thank yous, some of them death threats. Staff filters, deletes, forwards what's essential. But she reads one message in full. It's from a former Minneapolis firefighter, now retired. The subject line just says, "I was there." The email reads, "I was 5 feet away when Floyd stopped breathing. I've never been able to explain that moment in words. You did. Thank you." Jasmine sets the phone down. She doesn't cry. She doesn't speak. She just breathes. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz avoids the press for 36 hours. No follow-up interviews. No Twitter clarifications. His comms team crafts a statement, but he refuses to release it. Because how do you respond when a video, not an argument, but a truth, burns your position to the ground? Inside an emergency policy meeting among House Democrats, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act is on the screen again. For the first time in months, people stop posturing and start listening. Representative Ayanna Pressley leans forward. That moment, we can't let it end on a clip. We build the vote now. Whispers follow. Emails go out. Aides begin checking schedules for markups. Suddenly, something unthinkable begins to happen. The bill breathes again. But Jasmine isn't celebrating. She's rereading the bill line by line. Use of force standard. Qualified immunity. Chokehold bans. Every clause is a memory. Every footnote is someone's last breath. She marks a section with a red pen, tightens language, strikes out a loophole so small only someone who's seen injustice up close would even notice. Her aide knocks gently. "They want you on CNN tonight." "No," she replies. "Not yet. Let the silence do its job." Outside, protesters gather, not in chaos, but in vigil. At least 50 people kneel on the Capitol lawn. No chants, no signs, just knees on the grass, fists on hearts. A TV crew zooms in on a young girl with an afro and pink sneakers. She kneels too. Her sign says, "This is how you speak without shouting." And in that image, America sees itself, not as it is, but as it wants to be. Around midnight, Jasmine walks the empty halls of the Capitol alone. She passes the portraits of men who never heard a voice like hers in these walls. Men who wrote laws but ignored lives. She walks slowly, heels clicking softly on the polished stone. She stops at the bronze statue of Rosa Parks, not out of performance, not for the cameras, just stillness. One hand rests gently on the pedestal, and in a whisper not meant for history, not meant for headlines, she says, "They still need us to sit still before they hear us." Then she walks away. The knee said enough. The day after the hearing, the Capitol is quiet in a way that feels rehearsed. Like everyone's pretending not to have felt the room shift. But the shift remains. It lingers in the posture of aides walking faster than usual, in the awkward greetings between lawmakers who've shared 10 years of policy but never once shared a moment like that hearing gave them. In the private Republican strategy room, someone finally asked the question out loud. What do we do if this actually moves the bill? No one answers. Because everyone knows the problem isn't what Crockett said. It's that the country believed her. Cruz is finally cornered by a reporter on the East Steps. "Senator, do you regret dismissing the Floyd case the way you did yesterday?" He smiles, but it's thinner than usual. I wasn't dismissing anyone. I was reminding people that not every incident is racially motivated. But the clip Congresswoman Crockett played was emotional manipulation. We legislate with data, not feelings. The reporter doesn't press, because that answer already feels like a relic. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett has yet to issue a single new public statement. She doesn't need to, because her words weren't spoken to the press. They were spoken through them. On the House floor, she keeps her head down as procedural debate begins on a minor housing bill. But across the aisle, one Democrat quietly slides a note across to her bench. Just 5 words. That moment will never fade. She reads it, nods once, and tucks it into her folder. Later that afternoon, a private policy meeting in the Rayburn building. 6 key Democrats, 2 independents, 1 Republican who isn't up for re-election. They're all reviewing the revived draft of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. It's not the bill they passed in 21. That one died in the Senate like a stone dropped in a river. This one's tighter, angrier, stripped of apology. Jasmine isn't at the table, but her fingerprints are. A new clause appears, the Crockett Clause, colloquially dubbed by aides, mandating public release of all federal law enforcement use of force footage within 72 hours. No redactions, no internal reviews, no edits, only truth. By evening, the hearings are forgotten on the official schedule, but not online. A school teacher in Detroit prints out Jasmine's quote in bold serif font and tapes it above the whiteboard. They didn't have to say the N-word. The knee said enough. A nurse in Oakland posts it above the staff time clock. A student in Atlanta stencils it on the back of her jacket. And in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a pastor preaches it from the pulpit. This week, he says, voice low but rising, the truth didn't shout. It stood still. And stillness changed the air. That night, Jasmine stands in her apartment's narrow kitchen, the hum of the fridge the only sound. She's staring at a voicemail transcript on her phone. It's from George Floyd's cousin. I just wanted to say he would have appreciated that someone remembered, not just what happened, but how. She closes her eyes just for a moment. Then she calls her mother. They don't talk politics. They never really do. But tonight, her mother says, voice soft and proud, you sounded like yourself, the girl who wouldn't let the teacher skip the civil rights chapter. They both laugh, and then Jasmine whispers, Ma, I think they're going to rewrite it. The book? No, the bill. The next morning, the House Judiciary Committee formally reintroduces the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act for markup. Public notice goes out at 9 o'clock a.m. By 9:13 a.m., her quote has been printed, laminated, and taped to the front door of the hearing room by a volunteer staffer. She hadn't asked for that, but maybe in this moment, she no longer needs permission to be heard. If that moment hit you too, don't just sit with it. Comment below. Share this story. Subscribe, not for us, but for the truth still being erased. When the system tries to move on. 2 weeks pass. The energy that once surged through the Capitol halls has dulled into procedural murmur again. News cycles have shifted to inflation, to border crossings, to another unfolding scandal that promises nothing and delivers less. On cable news, the clip still appears now and then, usually in a segment called Moments That Mattered. But inside the House committee rooms, the tension hasn't faded. It's grown legs. Because what was supposed to be a moment is now a momentum lawmakers can't seem to reverse. On the second floor of the Dirksen building, a low-level staffer walks into a closed-door policy session, holding a memo so crisp it's still warm from the printer. It reads, Amended Federal Oversight Directive, Use of Force Investigation Mandate. Drafted, Reprier, Crockett's Office. Reviewed, Judiciary Subcommittee. Staff status, pending vote. The staffer places it in front of a conservative aide. The aide doesn't look up, just mutters, I thought this died in markup. The reply comes flat, factual, unblinking. It didn't. It adapted. Across the table, a senior Republican sighs, leans back in his chair and murmurs, the story outran the politics. No one disagrees. Jasmine sits in her office, surrounded by yellow legal pads and red-line documents. Her staff filters in and out like clockwork. She doesn't rush, doesn't check Twitter. The viral moment is behind her now, and that's exactly where she wants it. because this was never about spectacle. It was about policy. She taps her pen lightly against her temple, eyes locked on Section 3 of the bill, Federal Independent Review Boards for Use of Force Deaths. There's a clause here, one that's been intentionally vague for years. Now it reads, all reviews shall be independent, civilian-led, and must issue public recommendations within 90 days of incident. There are no asterisks, no deferrals, no escape hatches. She circles the line once, then nods to herself. Put it forward, she says to her legislative director. Pushback's going to be loud. Let it be. Back in the Senate, Cruz holds a closed meeting with senior aides and 2 lobbyists from a major police union. The union rep folds his hands, sighs heavily, and says, she's not just grandstanding, Senator. This bill's getting traction. Cruz tightens his jaw. Then we hit the funding angle. Make it about bloat, about red tape. She already preempted that in the last hearing. Then hit defund the police. Tie it to that. She said the opposite. Cruz doesn't respond, because in that moment he remembers what he saw in that room. Not the clip that went viral, but the look on her face when she sat down after speaking. She wasn't trying to win, she was trying to remember. And that's harder to argue against. Meanwhile, journalists begin to dig. Freedom of Information Act requests flood police departments. Advocacy groups start publishing body cam footage, not because they were told to, but because now the public expects it. Public pressure does what politics wouldn't. It changes the baseline. The pushback comes hard and fast. Fox commentators brand the bill a Trojan horse for anti-police rhetoric. A senior GOP senator takes to the floor to say, this legislation is not reform, it's revenge. But no one can erase the moment that birthed it, because even voters who don't agree with the entire bill now recognize the need for some reform, especially those who watched Floyd's final moments play out again in that Senate room and asked themselves quietly, what if that was my son? On the Sunday shows, a moderator asked Jasmine, are you surprised by the resistance this bill is still facing? She tilts her head, gives a soft smile, then says, I'm not here to be surprised. I'm here to be steady. Steady? Yes, steady like grief, steady like breath when someone's trying to take it. The moderator pauses, then simply says, that's powerful. She nods once. It's not power, it's memory. In the Capitol basement cafeteria where staffers whisper and aides vent, someone quietly slips a printout of the bill on the counter beside the register. A barista circles 2 lines in pink highlighter. Independent review. Public recommendations within 90 days. Beside it, a post-it note. It's not perfect, but it's real. By Thursday afternoon, the Judiciary Committee votes 15-13 to push the bill to full floor consideration. No press release, no celebration, just a ripple beneath the surface of the chamber floor. But those who know how change moves, they hear it. The system is trying to move on, but the story has made it impossible to return to silence. Behind doors meant to stay closed, the offices on K Street were never meant to hold light. They were designed for quiet power, polished oak doors, soundproofed walls, white noise machines whispering corporate lullabies into marble halls. And inside one of those rooms, a man in a tailored gray suit sets down a folder with trembling fingers. The name on the folder, Crockett Reform Package, Risk Assessment Memo. The mood in the room isn't outrage. It's something colder, calculation. She was supposed to be a freshman firebrand, one lobbyist says. She wasn't supposed to draft legislation that sticks. And she definitely wasn't supposed to move middle America. The silence that follows is thick with the scent of misjudgment. Across the table, a political strategist uncaps a marker and draws 3 arrows on a whiteboard, pointing to 3 names: Crockett, Presley, Bowman. This isn't a wave, it's an architecture. And it's not media savvy, it's media proof. Back on the Hill, things grow stranger. Leaked texts begin to surface. Screenshots shared anonymously, forwarded to journalists who know when not to ask for sources. A thread from a moderate Democrat staffer. They're trying to gut the use of force clause quietly. Pressures coming from a DOJ back channel. Another thread, this one from a former police union consultant. They're scared. That one clip is polling worse than January 6th in swing suburbs. The damage isn't in the language. It's in the truth that slipped past their defenses. At a conference table in the House Oversight Office, Jasmine sits with 3 legislative aides. One of them slides over a folder labeled Compromise Package, a watered-down version of her bill, rewritten by staffers who smile too wide and wear flag pins too sharp. They want us to consider language softeners, investigatory recommendations, instead of mandated findings. She closes the folder after the first page. That's not reform, that's rehearsal. But we might lose votes on the right. Then let them vote no cock on record. She stands, slowly. I didn't play Floyd's last breath so they could edit the pain into bullet points. The backlash grows quieter but sharper. Anonymous op-eds appear. Think tanks call the bill a surveillance overreach. Former prosecutors warn of burdening departments with bureaucracy. But Jasmine knows what all of it is. Not fear of bad policy, fear of accountability. One evening as dusk spreads over D.C., Jasmine walks out onto the Capitol steps and sees 2 young black women standing silently near the reflecting pool. One wears a hoodie that says, "The knee said enough," in bold white print. They don't approach her. They just nod. And in that nod, she understands. The moment has migrated. It no longer belongs to her. It belongs to anyone who watched that hearing and saw not just George Floyd, but themselves. The next morning, a low-level assistant stumbles across an internal memo titled Bill Dilution Strategy, Timeline for Distraction. It's not just unethical, it's almost theatrical. Time release of new culture war issue in tandem with markup week. Leaked DOJ reforms in progress to deflect from need for legislative vote. Float moderate compromise as pathway to consensus. Public messaging only. The memo ends with a chilling line. Optics of Crockett's moment must not be allowed to dictate policy. Within 24 hours, the memo is leaked to the press, and the entire strategy collapses in on itself. CNN runs the headline, Leaked Memo Shows Effort to Weaken Floyd Reform Bill. Twitter ignites. Jasmine says nothing. She doesn't need to, because the country is now watching the game, not just the players. Later, in a rare closed-door session with 2 swing state Republicans, Jasmine is invited to reconsider the timeline of the bill. She listens. Then she stands, places a single sheet of paper on the table. It's a transcript of Floyd's last words. No footnotes, no summaries, just one name, one moment. You asked me to wait, she says, but he didn't get to. The room goes quiet and stays that way. Meanwhile, high schoolers in St. Louis stage a walkout, not for test scores, not for budgets, but for police reform. Their chant, 1 knee, 9 minutes, 1 vote. The resistance behind closed doors will continue. That much she knows. But now every door they close echoes, and every echo leads back to one quiet, devastating sentence spoken in a room full of cameras. They didn't have to say the N-word. The knee said enough. A bill rewritten in blood and broadcasts. The morning of the House floor debate arrives like a storm with no rain. It's too quiet to trust. At 8:02 a.m., the final version of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act lands in the inboxes of every member of Congress. The subject line is sterile, revised text, final review, but the attachment isn't. It's different, sharper, less filtered. And at the top of page 1 in bold italics is a single line that was never part of any earlier draft. In memory of George Perry Floyd Jr. and those who couldn't breathe before him. Inside Jasmine Crockett's office, there are no cameras, just her and a copy of the bill. She reads it line by line, not for grammar, not for loopholes, but for ghosts. She finds them in every clause. The ban on chokeholds, the restriction on no-knock warrants, the national database of police misconduct. These aren't legal theories anymore. They are blood turned into language. Her legislative aide steps in. You should know it's going to pass, not by much, but it's enough. She doesn't look up. That's not what I'm listening for. Then what? Who speaks against it? That's the truth we'll have to live with. At 10 a.m., the session begins. C-SPAN doesn't need drama cues today. The names alone are enough. Representative Green sits upright, flipping through the bill with exaggerated skepticism. Cruz, from across the chamber, is quiet. He's not scheduled to speak today. His silence has become his only shield. But Jasmine watches every speech the way surgeons watch vital signs. An hour into debate, a congressman from a deep red district stands to speak. "We cannot govern from emotion," he says. "This bill was born of a moment, not of measured policy." He goes on about the dangers of federal overreach, the risk to officer morale, the need for balance between liberty and law. But no one claps, not even the usual echo chamber, because the air has shifted, because voters have shifted, because for the first time the moral center of the room is not theoretical, it's televised. Then it's Jasmine's turn. She steps to the lectern without notes, without a binder. Just the bill in her hand and that same calm stillness she carried through the hearing room 2 weeks ago. "You call this emotional?" she says. "I call it overdue." She doesn't shout. She doesn't perform. She remembers. A man begged to breathe for 9 minutes while a badge pressed against his spine. You call it a moment. We call it a memory that won't unbury itself. She pauses, then lowers her gaze to the bill. "You say this bill is born of grief. You're right. It is. And sometimes grief writes better laws than power ever could." Silence. Even the members who won't vote with her won't meet her eyes. The vote begins at 11:38 a.m. One by one, names light up on the electronic board. The tally climbs. At 12:04 p.m., the final count is announced. In the matter of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the bill is passed by a vote of 224 to 211. No applause, just a hush, then murmurs. History doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it lands with the sound of 224 hearts deciding to be counted. Outside, the Capitol lawn is quiet but crowded, not with banners, not with chants, but with people kneeling. Thousands. In silence. Some wear shirts with George Floyd's name. Others hold signs with Jasmine's quote. But most simply kneel, heads bowed, hands on pavement, still warm from sun. A little girl in a denim jacket holds a sign drawn in crayon. "My name is not a hashtag, thank you." Back inside, Jasmine walks the corridor alone, flanked by statues of men who could not imagine her. She runs her fingers along the marble wall, not in reverence, but in reminder. Every law has a fingerprint, and now so does this one. As she steps outside into the light, a reporter shouts, "Congresswoman, what would you say to the families watching this today?" She doesn't pause. She just says, "We didn't fix it, but we named it." And that's where justice begins. At that very moment, in a mid-sized living room in North Carolina, George Floyd's aunt watches the news. She holds a folded American flag to her chest and whispers, "He wasn't loud either." Stillness reclaimed, not gifted. D.C. at dusk is a city made of shadows. The monuments catch light like armor. The river holds secrets. In the air, just humid enough to sweat out truth, feels heavy with what's just passed. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is now law. Not flawless, not sweeping, but real, and on the record. For Jasmine Crockett, it's not a victory, not in the way headlines paint it. It's a receipt, proof of breath exchanged for ink, of a man's last words carved into policy, of grief refusing to go quietly. She doesn't take the usual victory lap. There are no press conferences, no ribbon-cutting photo ops, no viral speeches prepped for Instagram. Instead, she walks alone past Lincoln and toward the water. Just her and the echo of a country that, for once, listened. A low breeze stirs the trees along the reflecting pool. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughs. Life goes on, but not the same. Earlier that day, Cruz tried to pivot. He gave a brief interview to a local Texas station, saying, "I supported parts of the bill in spirit, but had serious concerns about unintended consequences." No one argued, no one replied, because by now everyone knew the consequence wasn't unintended. It was just inconvenient. In the gallery of the House chamber, a group of high school students on a field trip point to the seat Jasmine occupied during the vote. One whispers to the other, "That's where she said it." "Said what?" "You know, the thing about the knee." They fall quiet, not from boredom, but reverence. History has many rooms, but only a few are remembered by the stillness they held. Back in her apartment, Jasmine changes out of her blazer. The television glows in the corner, muted. News anchors trade opinions about what the bill means for November. Analysts predict backlash, praise strategy, assign credit. None of them mention George Floyd by name. None of them mention the silence. She pulls a box from the top shelf of her closet. Inside are newspaper clippings from the day he died. A photo of him with his daughter. A folded transcript of his final words. And tucked between the papers, a note she scribbled weeks earlier, before the hearing ever began. Just 6 words. Make the room carry his breath. She folds it again, smaller now, and slips it behind a framed photo of her grandmother. She doesn't need the note anymore. The room carried it. The country carried it. She carried it until the law did. Later that night, she logs onto a live stream of a town hall in Houston. A local pastor speaks from a small wooden podium. We know justice isn't final, but neither is erasure. They tried to erase that man's pain. She put it in federal record. Behind him, a projector shows the full video again. Not for spectacle, but for memory. No narration, no edits, just Floyd, just breath. The live stream chat is quiet until one message appears. My son's name won't be next. Then another, she made the stillness speak. And finally, America saw it this time. In a city that never really sleeps, Jasmine turns off the lights, steps onto her balcony, and stares out across rooftops lined with antennae, protest signs, and scaffolding. Somewhere, new names are being written on petitions, on placards, on stone. But tonight, there is no chant, no flame, just stillness. Not the kind used to smother voices, but the kind that comes after something true has been spoken and finally heard. The world didn't change in one vote. The law didn't erase the footage. It didn't return the breath. But it did something America has rarely done when it comes to black pain. It looked, it listened, and it stayed. That matters, because too often the nation flinches, edits, deflects, calls it too political, too divisive, too soon. But this time, stillness didn't mean silence. It meant presence. It meant a woman standing in a room of power, refusing to perform, refusing to yell, because truth, when delivered with care, doesn't need to. It just needs to land. So maybe the takeaway isn't the bill, or the quote, or the moment on TV. Maybe it's what Jasmine reminded us all of. That dignity isn't given in rooms like that. It's brought in and it's held, even when no one else will. So if you ever find yourself in a space where the air feels wrong, the weight unbearable, and the truth inconvenient, stand still, say the thing, then sit down and let the silence work. Tell us what moment hit hardest. Share this story with someone who still thinks this never happens. Subscribe for stories that tell the truth, especially when it's uncomfortable. This story is a fictionalized and dramatized narrative. Any resemblance to real events or individuals beyond public record is purely coincidental.